The night I walked into the Thornwell estate, I had nothing left to lose. No family, no money, no name worth whispering in the circles that mattered. Just a crumpled envelope pressed against my ribs beneath my coat, and a debt so deep it had swallowed everyone I'd ever loved. The guards didn't search me. They didn't need to. One look at me, rain-soaked, trembling, heels cracked from 6 blocks of walking through a downpour, and they stepped aside like I was already a ghost. Maybe I was. The foyer smelled of aged oak and cigar smoke. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across marble floors, and somewhere deep in the house, a piano played something slow and mournful, the kind of melody that made your chest ache without knowing why. I counted 7 men before I reached the main hall, all armed, or all watching me with the kind of stillness that comes from years of standing beside violence without flinching. And then I saw him. Colter Vane. He sat at the far end of a long mahogany table, one hand resting on a glass of bourbon, the other tracing the edge of a sealed letter. His suit was midnight black, fitted like it had been stitched directly onto his body. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone, sharp jaw, high cheekbones, and eyes so pale they looked silver in the lamplight. Those eyes found me the moment I crossed the threshold. He didn't stand, didn't smile, didn't even blink. Around him sat a half-circle of men in expensive suits, Boone Mercer, his enforcer, a mountain of muscle and silence with a scar running from his left ear to his chin. Stetson Graves, the money man, thin and sharp-featured, was tapping a gold pen against a leather ledger, and 3 others I didn't recognize but could feel. Their authority filled the room like smoke. "Bring her closer," Colter said. His voice was low, unhurried, like a man who had never needed to repeat himself. 2 guards flanked me and guided me forward until I stood at the opposite end of the table, dripping rainwater onto a rug that probably cost more than every apartment I'd ever rented combined. "Jessamine Lockwood," he said, tasting my name like he was deciding whether to keep it. "Your father owed me $300,000. He died before he could pay. Your mother tried to negotiate. She vanished. And now you're here." I swallowed hard. "I'm here to settle the debt." A murmur rippled through the room. Stetson Graves looked up from his ledger with an expression somewhere between amusement and pity. Colter tilted his head. "With what?" "With whatever it takes." He studied me for a long, unbearable moment. Then his gaze dropped to the envelope I'd pulled from inside my coat. My hands were shaking, but I held it out like it was a loaded weapon. "My father left this," I said. "It's addressed to you. He told me, before he died, that this letter would settle everything." The silence that followed was suffocating. Colter didn't reach for it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, crossed one ankle over the other, and let out a breath that was almost, a laugh. "A letter," he said. Boone Mercer shifted in his seat. The scar on his face caught the light. "Your father owed me a fortune," Colter continued, his voice still impossibly calm. "See, and you walk in here, soaking wet, no money, no leverage, with a letter." "It's not just a letter," I said. My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated myself for it. He picked up his bourbon and took a slow sip, watching me over the rim. Then he set the glass down and leaned forward, the silver in his eyes sharpening into something dangerous. "I'll tell you what," he said. "I'll give you $1 million. Right here, right now, if you can read that letter out loud, in front of everyone." The room went still. Stetson's pen stopped tapping. Boone's jaw tightened. Even the guards seemed to lean in. I stared at Colter, searching for the trap, because there was always a trap with men like him. "Why?" I asked. "Because I already know what it says." He paused, and the ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "Ooh, and I don't think you do." My fingers tightened around the envelope. My father had sealed it with red wax, an old habit, a relic from the days when he pretended we were still important. The seal bore a symbol I'd seen once before, stamped into a wooden box he kept hidden in the floor of his study. a serpent swallowing its own tail. I looked at Colter Vane, this man who owned half the city who could end me with a word, and I saw something behind those cold silver eyes. Not cruelty, curiosity. He wanted me to open it. He needed me to open it. And that small, almost invisible crack in his armour told me more than any threat ever could. Whatever was in this letter terrified him. So I broke the seal. The paper was yellowed, brittle at the edges, covered in my father's cramped handwriting. I recognised his script, the way his letters slanted left. The way he crossed his T's with a long, aggressive stroke. I began to read. To Colter Vane, heir to the Thornwell Syndicate. Louder, Colter said. I steadied my breath and raised my voice. To Colter Vane, heir to the Thornwell Syndicate. If you are reading this, I am dead. And if my daughter is reading this to you, then you have already failed to find what you've been looking for. The room shifted. I could feel it, a collective intake of breath, the creak of chairs, the sudden weight of attention pressing in from every direction. I kept reading. You believe I owed you money. You are wrong. The 300,000 was payment. Protection money, your father, Obadiah Vane, extracted from me in exchange for my silence about the Perdition Accord. Colter's expression didn't change, but his hand, the one resting on the table, went very, very still. The Perdition Accord, I continued, my voice gaining strength I didn't know I had, was not a trade agreement. It was a confession, a record of every payment, every disappearance, every buried name connected to your family's rise. 14 families destroyed, 31 people erased. And your father signed every page. Silence. Not the polite kind. The kind that precedes either a bullet or a bomb. I looked up from the letter and met Colter's gaze. His silver eyes were burning. Keep going, he said quietly. It wasn't a request. I hid the original document, I read. Not in a vault, not in a bank. I hid it somewhere only Jessamine can find, because she is the only person alive who knows the language I wrote the key in. If you harm her, you will never find it. If you let her go, she will have no reason to look. This is my final negotiation, Colter. My daughter's life for your empire's survival. I lowered the letter. The room was frozen. Every man, every guard, every shadow seemed to hold its breath. Colter stared at me with an expression I couldn't name, something between fury and fascination, like I was a grenade someone had placed gently in his hands. You didn't know, he said finally. No. You walked in here thinking this letter would free you. Yes. He stood, slowly, deliberately. Every man in the room adjusted, hands moving to weapons, bodies shifting, eyes darting. But Colter waved them down with a single flick of his wrist, and they obeyed like trained dogs. He walked toward me. Each step was measured, controlled, the way a predator moves when it knows its prey has nowhere to run. He stopped close enough that I could smell his cologne, sandalwood, leather, something darker beneath it like smoke from an old fire. Do you know what you've just done? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I read a letter. You just became the most valuable person in this city, my heart hammered against my ribs, and the most dangerous. Something flickered in his eyes, respect maybe, or the first spark of something he hadn't expected to feel. He reached out and took the letter from my hand, his fingers brushing mine. The contact was brief, electric, and entirely deliberate. You're not leaving, he said. You can't keep me here. I'm not keeping you. He folded the letter and slipped it into his jacket. I'm protecting you, because in about 4 hours, every syndicate in this city is going to know that Amos Lockwood's daughter holds the key to destroying the Thornwell Empire, and every last one of them will come for you. I wanted to argue. I wanted to run. But the truth in his words pinned me to the floor. Boone, Colter said without turning around. Prepare the east wing. Boss, Boone started. Now. Boone stood, his massive frame unfolding like a storm cloud, and disappeared through a side door. Colter turned back to me. "You'll stay here, you'll have everything you need, and when you're ready, you're going to help me find that document before someone else does. And if I refuse, then I can't protect you. And trust me, Jessamine, what's out there is far worse than what's in here." He said my name like it was a secret he was learning to keep. I should have been afraid. I was afraid. But beneath the fear was something else, a burning, reckless curiosity that had always gotten me into trouble. "One condition," I said. His eyebrow lifted. Barely, but enough. "The $1 million you promised. I want it." For the first time that night, Colter Vane almost smiled. Not the kind of smile that warms a room, the kind that burns it down. "You read the letter," he said. "Fair is fair." He turned to Stetson. "Transfer it." Stetson's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Colter!" Did I stutter? Stetson's pen moved, and just like that I became a millionaire standing in a dead man's shoes, trapped in the house of the most dangerous man I'd ever met, holding the key to a secret that could topple an empire. The piano had stopped playing. The rain had not. Colter gestured toward the hallway. "Oh, someone will show you to your room." I nodded and turned to go, but his voice stopped me at the threshold. "Jessamine." I looked back. "Your father was a clever man," he said, "but clever men still die. Don't make his mistake." What mistake was that? Trusting that a letter could save someone. I held his gaze for one long, trembling moment. Then I walked into the hallway, where a woman with dark eyes and a holstered pistol waited to escort me. My room in the East Wing was larger than my entire apartment. A four-poster bed draped in charcoal silk, a window overlooking the city's glittering skyline, a wardrobe already filled with clothes in my exact size, which meant they'd been watching me long before tonight. I sat on the edge of the bed, my coat still dripping, and pressed my palms against my eyes. My father had planned this. All of it. The debt, the letter, the wax seal. It was a chess game, and I was the final piece he'd placed on the board before the clock ran out. But he'd left me something else. Something the letter hadn't mentioned. The language he'd written the key in wasn't some obscure code or ancient script. It was the private language we'd invented when I was 7, a jumble of made-up words and reversed syllables that we'd used to talk about birthday presents and hide-and-seek strategies, and later things too painful to say in any real language. It was ours. Only ours. And somewhere in this city, written in a language only I could read, was a document that could bring the Thornwell Syndicate and Colter Vane to their knees. The question was, did I want to destroy him, or did I need him alive? Because as I sat there in the dark, watching the rain streak down the window like the city itself was weeping, I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at me when I read that letter. Not like I was a problem to solve, like I was the answer to one. 3 days passed before Colter spoke to me again. 3 days of silence, of meals delivered on silver trays by staff who wouldn't meet my eyes. 3 days of wandering the East Wing like a bird in a gilded cage, counting exits, testing locks, mapping the halls. I learned the rhythms of the house. Boone patrolled the perimeter at dawn and midnight. Stetson arrived at 9, left at 6, always carrying that leather ledger. The woman who'd escorted me that first night, I'd overheard someone call her Eulalia, moved through the house like a shadow, appearing and disappearing without sound. On the 4th morning, and I found a note slipped under my door. Study, 10 a.m., come alone. No signature, no need for one. The study was on the 2nd floor, walls lined with books, a fireplace cold and dark, and Colter seated behind a massive desk with the letter spread open before him. He looked different in daylight, less like a weapon, more like a man who hadn't slept. The top button of his shirt was undone. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing the edges of black ink, tattoos that climbed his forearms and disappeared beneath the fabric. "Sit," he said. I sat. "Your father mentions a key written in a language only you understand." He folded his hands. Explain. It's private. Nothing is private in this house. This is. He studied me, his silver eyes unreadable. I held my ground. If I gave him everything, I had no leverage, no safety, no reason for him to keep me alive. You're smart, he said finally, and it didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like a threat assessment. I'm my father's daughter. Your father is dead. And yet here we are, still playing his game. Something shifted behind his eyes, a crack in the marble. He leaned back and ran a hand through his dark hair, and for one unguarded second, I saw exhaustion. Real, human exhaustion. People are already moving, he said. Remington Cross sent a message last night. He wants a meeting. He's never wanted a meeting. Who is Remington Cross? Someone who would burn this entire city to get what your father hid. A chill crawled down my spine. I need you to find the document, Colter said, before he does. Before anyone does. And what do I get? You get to live. I'm already living. Thanks to my father's planning and your word. He almost laughed, a sharp exhale through his nose, not quite humour, not quite frustration. What do you want, Jessamine? The truth. About what? About my mother. The temperature in the room dropped, his expression sealed shut like a vault. Your mother disappeared because she chose to, he said. You're lying. I don't lie. I omit. Then omit less. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the hardwood. He walked to the window and stood with his back to me, hands in his pockets, silhouetted against the grey morning light. Find the document, he said, and I'll tell you everything about your mother, where she went, why she left, and who helped her disappear. My breath caught. You know. I know more than you're ready to hear. I wanted to scream, I wanted to throw something. Instead, I sat perfectly still and locked every emotion behind a wall so thick even I couldn't feel through it. Deal, I said. He turned from the window and looked at me, really looked at me for the first time without the mask of authority. And what I saw there was not a monster, not a saint, something in between, something hungry and haunted and holding itself together by sheer, stubborn will. Deal, he echoed. We started that afternoon. Colter cleared the study and had every document my father had ever touched brought in. Boxes upon boxes of paperwork, financial records, personal journals. I sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through my father's life like an archaeologist sifting through ruins. Colter stayed. He didn't have to. He had an empire to run, enemies circling, 1,000 fires to put out. But he stayed. Was seated in the leather chair across from me, reading through files with the focused intensity of a man defusing a bomb. We didn't speak for hours. The silence between us was different from the silence of the past 3 days. This was a working silence, a shared silence, the kind that builds something without either person realizing it. Around 6, Eulalia brought coffee, black for him. She glanced at me and raised an eyebrow. Cream, no sugar, I said. She'll have the same as me, Colter said without looking up. Eulalia left. I stared at him. I don't like black coffee. You'll learn. That's not how preferences work. It is in this house. I picked up the cup and took a sip. It was bitter, intense, and far better than I'd expected. Well, he asked, still not looking up. It's adequate. The corner of his mouth twitched. Just barely. If I'd blinked, I would have missed it. But I didn't blink. On the 6th night, I found it. Buried in the back of my father's journal, the one with the water-stained cover and the broken spine, was a page covered in our language, our secret, ridiculous childhood language. I read it once, then again, then a third time, my hands trembling so violently the page shook. It wasn't just a key, it was a map. Coordinates, directions, and a single sentence at the bottom that made my blood run cold. Forgive me, little bird. The serpent is closer than you think. Little bird. That's what he'd called me. Every day of my childhood, every bedtime story, every whispered goodbye. I pressed the journal to my chest and closed my eyes, For one terrible, fragile moment, I let myself miss him. Then I pulled myself together and went to find Colter. He was in the main hall, standing by the window with a phone pressed to his ear. When he saw my face, he ended the call immediately. "You found it," he said. "I found something, but we have a problem." "What problem?" "The document isn't in a bank or a safe house. It's buried. Physically buried. Beneath a building on Meridian Street." His expression tightened. "Meridian Street is cross territory. I know. You're asking me to walk into enemy ground. I'm not asking you anything. I'm telling you where it is. What you do with that information is your business." He took a step closer, then another, until we were standing close enough that I could count the flecks of blue in his silver eyes. "You're coming with me," he said. That wasn't part of the deal." "The deal changed the moment Cross got involved." "You can't just change deals." "I can do anything I want." He said it without arrogance, just fact. The same way you might say the sky is above you or the ground is below. And then, quietly, almost gently, "But I'm asking." It was the first time he'd asked me for anything. "Fine," I whispered. He nodded once and turned to leave, but at the doorway he paused. "Jessamine." "What?" "When this is over, whatever we find down there, you should know that I won't be the same man I was when you walked in that door." "Is that a warning?" "It's a confession." He disappeared into the hallway, and I stood there in the dark, my heart doing things it had no right to do. Because somewhere between the silence and the coffee and the long hours on that study floor, Colter Vane had stopped being my captor and had started becoming something far more dangerous. The car pulled up to Meridian Street at midnight, black SUV, tinted windows. Boone drove. Eulalia rode shotgun, her pistol resting on her thigh like an extension of her hand. Colter sat beside me in the back. He hadn't said a word during the 20-minute drive, but at some point his hand had found the space between us on the seat and his little finger was touching mine. I didn't move it. Neither did he. The building was an abandoned warehouse, or at least it looked abandoned. But as we approached, I saw the cameras, the reinforced doors, the faint glow of light from a basement window. "This isn't empty," I said. "No," Colter agreed. "It's not." Boone and Eulalia went in first. I heard nothing. No shots. No shouts. Just the kind of efficient silence that told me these people were very, very good at what they did. Colter took my hand. His grip was firm, warm, and his thumb traced a slow circle across my knuckles that sent a shiver straight through my center. "Stay close," he said. "I wasn't planning on wandering off." "You were planning 6 escape routes from the moment we got in the car. I counted the way your eyes moved." I looked at him, startled. "I notice everything about you," he said. "It's becoming a problem." We moved through the warehouse in darkness. Boone had cleared a path. I didn't ask how. And we descended into a sub-basement that smelled of damp concrete and rust. The coordinates from my father's journal led to a section of floor beneath a collapsed shelving unit. Boone moved the shelves while Colter and I watched. And after 20 minutes of digging through packed earth and broken concrete, Boone's hands closed around a metal box. He set it on the ground. We all stared at it. "Open it," Colter said to me. The lock was a combination, 4 digits. I entered my birthday. The box opened. Inside was a leather-bound folder thick with pages, and on top of it a photograph. My mother, standing outside a house I didn't recognize, smiling at whoever was holding the camera. She was alive. Or she had been when this photo was taken. My hands shook. Colter. But his expression stopped me. He was staring at the folder with a look I'd never seen on his face before. Fear, not of the document, not of what it could do to his empire. He was afraid of what it would do to me. "Jessamine," he said, "some truths are cages. Once you walk in, or you don't walk out." "I've been in a cage my whole life," I said. "At least this time I'm choosing which one." I opened the folder. The first page was a list of names, Dozens of them. Families, businesses, politicians, all connected to the Thornwell syndicate through payments, threats, and blood. The third name on the list was my mother's. Not as a victim, as a partner. The floor tilted beneath me, the warehouse, the city, the entire world I thought I knew. All of it cracked and rearranged like a mirror dropped from a great height. She wasn't running from your family, I whispered. She was working with them. Colter said nothing, but his hand found mine again, and this time he held on tight. Your father found out, he said quietly. That's why he compiled the Perdition Accord. Not to destroy my family. To expose the people who had infiltrated his, including your mother. Where is she now? Jessamine, where is she? Remington Cross is her brother. The world stopped. Everything, the warehouse, the rain, the faint hum of the city above us, collapsed into a single devastating point of clarity. Remington Cross wasn't just a rival syndicate leader. He was my uncle. And my mother hadn't vanished. She'd gone home. I looked at Colter, and the distance between us felt like both an ocean and a breath. You knew, I said. This whole time. I knew pieces, not all of it. Not until tonight. Is that supposed to make it better? No, he said. Nothing about this is better. Boone appeared in the doorway. Boss, we've got company. 3 vehicles approaching from the east. Colter's entire demeanour shifted. The exhaustion, the vulnerability, or all of it vanished behind a wall of cold command. Cross? Likely. Get us out. North exit. Now! He pulled me to my feet, and we ran. Through corridors, upstairs into the cold night air. Gunfire erupted somewhere behind us, distant but closing. Eulalia returned fire from a position I couldn't see, covering our retreat with the calm precision of someone ordering lunch. We reached the SUV. Boone drove like the vehicle was an extension of his rage, fast, brutal, and terrifyingly effective. I clutched the leather folder against my chest, my mother's photograph pressed between the pages. Colter sat beside me, his breathing steady, his hands still wrapped around mine. You promised me the truth, I said. I did. Then tell me one more thing. Anything. When you offered me that $1 million to read the letter, did you already know what would happen? Did you know it would lead to this? He was silent for a long time. The city blurred past the window, lights smearing like wet paint. I didn't know, he said, but I hoped. Hoped for what? He turned to face me, and in the fleeting glow of a passing streetlight, I saw something in his silver eyes that I'd never expected to find there. Not power, not control, not the cold machinery of a man who'd built his life on fear. Hope. That you'd be brave enough to stay, he whispered. Boone took the long route back, winding through side streets and industrial corridors I'd never seen before, doubling back twice to make sure no one was following. Eulalia kept watch through the rear window, her expression carved from granite, her finger never leaving the trigger guard. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass and tried to organize the wreckage inside my head. My mother, the woman who'd braided my hair and read me fairy tales and cried at my school plays, had been working with the very people my father spent his life trying to expose. She hadn't been a victim. She'd been a player. And when the game got too dangerous, she hadn't taken me with her. She'd left me behind. Stop thinking so loud, Colter murmured beside me. You can't hear thoughts. I can hear yours. They're deafening. I almost laughed. Almost. The sound died somewhere in my throat, replaced by something raw, a grief so deep it didn't have a name yet. When I was 12, I said, not knowing why I was telling him this, my father taught me to play chess. Not the regular way. He'd set up the board with pieces missing, sometimes a queen, sometimes both rooks, and he'd say, life doesn't give you a full set, little bird. Learn to win with what you have. Colter was quiet for a moment. He taught you well. He taught me to survive. I'm not sure that's the same thing. Tonight it is. We pulled through the estate gates just before 2 in the morning. The house rose before us like a fortress, every window dark except one, the study on the second floor where Stetson Graves sat waiting with his ledger and a look on his face that said he already knew everything had changed. Colter helped me out of the car. His hand lingered on my elbow, a steadying touch, not a possessive one, and for a breath I let myself lean into it. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you." "I don't sleep, so not anymore." He said it the way he said everything, like a fact, not a confession. But I heard what lived beneath those words, the weight of every decision, every name in that folder, every ghost that walked these halls when the lights went out. "Colter," he stopped. "Thank you for not lying to me tonight." He looked at me across the gravel drive, rain misting between us like a curtain neither of us was ready to pull aside. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "The worst truths are still coming." Then he turned and walked into the darkness of the house, and I stood there with my father's secrets pressed against my heart and the taste of black coffee still on my tongue. And in the space between his hand and mine, in that small, impossible warmth, I felt the first terrifying stirring of something I could not afford to feel. Not yet, but soon. The city lights bled through the rain-streaked glass, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, long, mournful, like the city itself was mourning what was coming. I tightened my grip on his hand. He tightened his on mine, and neither of us let go,